This is another podcast from Alpha Business Media, Nepal. You probably picture, majestic mountains, ancient temples, but behind that image, there's a reality of some pretty profound challenges. And it's precisely there, in one of the world's least developed countries, that a sort of quiet revolution is happening. It's really redefining what innovation can mean. It really makes you wonder, though, in a place where, let's say, the government or big business, the usual actors, often struggle to make headway, what does truly impactful innovation actually look like?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're using a fascinating source called Innovation from Below, how Nepali CSOs, that civil society organizations and social entrepreneurs, are solving critical problems. It's a really deep look at how seemingly simple but brilliant ideas are tackling huge issues. Things like clean water, education, even waste management.
Right, driven by local ingenuity.
Absolutely.
So our mission today is to unpack how these grassroots solutions, spearheaded by social entrepreneurs, community groups, are genuinely transforming lives, often with methods that really fly in the face of conventional wisdom. And I think the key thing for you listening is this isn't just about Nepal. The lessons here, they're universal. They offer some powerful insights into problem solving that, frankly, could apply anywhere.
Okay, so to really get this ingenuity, we need to understand the context first, the scale of the challenge. Nepal is officially one of the least developed countries globally. Almost a third of the population lives below the poverty line. GDP per capita, just over $1,000. It's stark.
It really is. And the systemic issues, they run incredibly deep. You've got an economy heavily reliant on agriculture, which just doesn't create enough jobs. This leads to a huge outflow of young people, especially men, looking for work abroad. We're talking nearly a quarter, 23.4% actually, of Nepalese households have someone living permanently outside the country.
Wow, a quarter. That must reshape communities completely. It does. It leads to record low birth rates, sometimes leaving entire villages without a working age population. It's a massive demographic shift. And then layered on top, you have political instability, which discourages, big foreign investment. Government efforts, well, they exist, lots of development plans, but they often get bogged down by bureaucracy, lack of resources, and we can't forget the deep-rooted social barriers. Things like the caste system, gender inequality, these severely limit access to education, economic power, even a political voice, particularly for women in lower castes.
Okay, so that's a really tough picture, but you mentioned this quiet but powerful revolution emerging from this context. Where do we start seeing these sparks of hope? And it seems paradoxical, right, that mass migration, which sounds like such a drain, could actually be a catalyst for positive change.
It does sound like a paradox, doesn't it? But in this vacuum, where traditional systems are struggling, this revolution is bubbling up. And yes, surprisingly, that migration has become a catalyst. With so many men working abroad, Nepalese women are stepping up, they're heading households, taking on new roles, and increasingly, they're becoming leaders in these grassroots innovations.
Interesting.
And the really profound insight here, I think, is that solving these complex, messy problems doesn't always need massive budgets or high-tech solutions. What it often needs is deep local understanding, that entrepreneurial courage you mentioned, and, well, clever, sometimes very simple ideas.
Right, understanding the need from the ground up. So let's talk about one of the most fundamental needs, clean water. How big of a struggle is that in Nepal?
It's a daily reality for a huge chunk of the population. Somewhere between 20, maybe 25% lack access to safe drinking water. This forces people to use polluted sources, rivers, streams, ponds, and the direct result is widespread disease. Dysentery, typhoid, cholera. It's a serious health crisis.
And I read something shocking in some urban areas. Tap water might only come on once every 3 days.
That's right. Imagine planning your life around that. And the social dimension is huge.
How so?
Well, the burden of collecting water, it falls almost entirely on women and children. They can spend up to 3 hours a day walking, often over really difficult hilly terrain, just to fetch water.
3 hours? That's incredible.
Think about what that means. That's time stolen. Stolen from school, from earning an income, from childcare, from just living. It directly keeps families trapped in poverty.
It's more than just an inconvenience then. It's a barrier to development.
Absolutely.
But as often happens, crisis breeds innovation. We see companies like Smart Payani and Best Payani stepping in. I heard the story of Gokul Dangal, co-founder of Best Payani.
Yes, a water engineer himself.
Right, who experienced scarcity firsthand and just started installing rainwater systems for family and friends. That personal drive seems key.
It really does. And what's fascinating about their approach isn't just the technology itself, which is actually quite simple. Rooftop rainwater harvesting. filtering it through layers of sand and gravel.
Low-tech, gravity-fed, no electricity needed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Perfect for almost any location, rural or urban. But the real innovation, the genius part, is their business model. It's sustainable and service-based.
How does that differ from, say, an NGO just installing a pump?
Well, many NGOs might have a set-it-and-forget-it approach, right? Install the tech, maybe do a little training, and move on. Smart Piani and Beth Piani, they sell a complete solution. Installation, yes, but also training on how to use it and crucial ongoing maintenance. They build trust, they ensure the systems keep working. It's a long-term relationship, not a one-off project. It becomes a reliable service people can count on.
And the impact numbers are pretty staggering. Best Piani reached 300,000 people in just 3 years.
300,000. And Smart Piani, over about 10 years, they've installed systems in over 4,000 homes and 300 government schools. That's clean water for more than 75,000 students. It's significant.
It really is. But let's connect the dots, like you said. Why does this matter beyond just preventing disease? What's the chain reaction?
Okay, think about it. A school gets a reliable water source. Suddenly kids, especially girls, don't need to spend hours trekking for water.
So they can actually attend school regularly.
Exactly. And they're safer, too. Those long walks can be dangerous, risks of kidnapping, violence. It reduces those risks significantly. And for women, those hours are freed up. They can pursue education themselves, find paid work, invest more time in their families or businesses. It fuels economic stability, empowers women.
So a simple water filter becomes a catalyst for education, safety, economic growth, women's empowerment.
Precisely. It shows how tackling one basic need can unlock progress across so many different areas. It's systemic change from a simple starting point.
Okay, let's shift from that fundamental need, water, to another critical area, education. Nepal's public education system faces some deep issues. It's sometimes called the Iron Gate, I understand.
That's right. It refers to those crucial national exams after 10th grade, the School Leaving Certificate, or SLC. Passing them is key to future opportunities. But the statistics, well, they paint a pretty stark picture of the quality gap. In 2015, for instance, only about 33% of public school kids passed the SLC.
Only a third, compared to...
Compared to almost 90%, 89% from private schools. And remember, about 80% of all Nepali children attend public schools. So that gap affects the vast majority.
That's a huge disparity. What else contributes to the problem?
Well, there are other factors, too. Chronic textbook shortages are common. Child labor is still an issue, driven by poverty. Plus, school fees can be a burden. And then there's limited access to vocational training, particularly for girls and for children from the Dalit caste, who face significant systemic discrimination.
So another challenging landscape, but again, innovators are stepping in not just to apply bandages, but aiming for real change. Tell us about organizations like Teach for Nepal, TFN, and Canopy Nepal.
Right. Teach for Nepal, or TFN, its innovation is really in human capital. It's modeled partly on Teach for America. They recruit these really bright, motivated university grads and young professionals.
And send them where?
Into 2-year teaching fellowships in some of the most challenging, under-resourced rural schools. But they're more than just teachers filling a gap. They become mentors, role models, and crucially, they bring modern teaching methods, moving away from rote memorization towards things like project-based learning, developing soft skills, critical thinking, teamwork, and even setting up makerspaces.
Makerspaces, like hands-on workshops.
Exactly, where kids can learn by doing, tinkering, creating. It's about fostering curiosity and practical skills.
Okay, so that's TFN's approach. What about Canopy Nepal?
Canopy Nepal takes a more holistic view. They recognize that good teaching alone isn't always enough if a child is facing other major hurdles. So they build this whole ecosystem of support around vulnerable students. It includes educational stipends, cash to help families cover basic needs, but also psychosocial support, making sure kids get nutritious food, and actively involving parents.
So it's not just about the classroom, it's about the child's whole environment.
Precisely. Creating the conditions where a child can actually thrive and learn, becoming confident and independent.
The impact on individual students must be pretty profound. Beyond just better grades, how does it change their lives? I heard about a student, Sita Maya Tameng.
Yes, her story is really inspiring. For students in these programs, it's often about much more than just academic improvement, though that happens too. Working with these motivated TFN fellows, for example, it changes their whole outlook, their aspirations. It gives them the belief that, yes, they can achieve more, regardless of their background. Sita Maya Taman came from a rural school, received TFN support, and eventually went on to attend a prestigious college in Germany.
Wow. That's life-changing.
Absolutely. But it raises the bigger question, right? What's the lasting impact beyond these individual success stories?
Good point. Is it sustainable?
Well, this is where TFN's model has a really interesting long-term effect. It creates this unique network of alumni. These young leaders, after spending 2 intense years teaching in rural
They
Nepal,
get a real school of life
yeah,
experience.
exactly. They gain this incredibly deep firsthand understanding of the country's real root problems. Then, after their fellowship, they don't just disappear. They go into politics, they start their own social enterprises, they work in business and NGOs. They carry that experience with them.
So it's building a new generation of leaders.
That's the idea. Leaders who make decisions based on actual hard-won experience, not just abstract theories. It's a long-term investment, really, in Nepal's future leadership.
That's a powerful ripple effect. Okay, let's pivot to another really visible, pressing issue, especially in urban areas: waste management. Kathmandu Valley, I understand, is facing a serious crisis, literally drowning in waste.
That's not an exaggeration.
Yeah.
We're talking about 1,200 tons of garbage being dumped in landfills every single day.
1,200 tons daily.
Daily. And the really frustrating thing is, estimates suggest up to 70% of that waste could be recycled or composted. But Nepal has historically lacked a modern, efficient recycling industry.
And like the other issues we've discussed, there's a strong social dimension here too, isn't there, with waste collection?
Very much so. The work of collecting recyclables, sorting through waste, it's traditionally seen as dirty, low-status work. It's mainly done by marginalized groups, often called Khalisi. And despite doing absolutely vital work for the city, they face significant social stigma, disrespect. Often denied entry into homes, their contribution just ignored.
So it's an environmental problem tangled up with a social justice issue.
Precisely.
And again, we see social enterprises stepping up to tackle both sides. Let's talk about Khalisi and Biocomp Nepal. Ayushi Casey, the founder of Khalisi, her story sounds quite remarkable.
It really is. She actually left a very prestigious, well-paying job at USA Tokai.
To start a garbage startup.
Exactly. As she tells it, her idea of using digital tech to connect waste collectors with households initially drew, well, laughter and disbelief from many.
So what is Khalisi's model? How does it work?
It's brilliantly simple, in a way. It's essentially a digital platform, a website, a mobile app that acts like an Uber for waste. It connects households or offices that have recyclable materials directly with the nearest informal waste picker in their network.
So it's not creating a whole new collection system.
No, that's the genius of it. It takes the existing informal network of collectors, people already doing this work, and it digitizes, organizes, and empowers them. It makes their work more efficient, more predictable, and ultimately more profitable. It's using tech to enhance, not replace, the existing reality.
That's clever. What about Biocomp Nepal? Their approach seems different.
Yes, Biocomp Nepal was started by enthusiasts from the Netherlands. They tackled the biggest component of waste first, organic waste, which is over 70% of the total volume in Kathmandu. They developed a process to turn that organic waste into high-quality compost, which they then sell to farmers. So closing that loop.
Okay, so handling the organic side, but what about plastics?
Right, then they took on an even tougher challenge. Low-grade plastics. That's like plastic bags, film, wrappers, stuff that's notoriously hard to recycle. Biocomp developed a technology to transform this previously useless plastic waste into new, durable products. Things like construction boards. So they've created a whole waste-to-goods production chain.
Incredible. Turning trash into building materials, the economic impact seems clear, creating value, new industries. Khalisi, you said, increased picker income by 35%.
Yes, on average 32–35%. That's a significant boost. And Biocomp and similar companies, they're essentially building the foundations of a proper recycling industry where one barely existed.
But going back to that social stigma, how do these initiatives address that? Because that seems just as important.
Absolutely, and this might be the most profound impact. They're actively changing the perception of this work. Khalisi, for example, made a very conscious decision to rebrand their collectors.
Yep.
They don't call them waste pickers. They call them Khalisi friends. It sounds simple, but combined with the digital tools, the fair pricing, the increased income, it's had a dramatic effect. It changes how the workers see themselves, and slowly, how society sees them too. Work that was deeply associated with shame now starts to bring a sense of pride and awareness of their vital role in the city's health and environment. It's chipping away at those deep-rooted prejudices.
It's about restoring dignity through innovation.
Exactly. Dignity and efficiency hand in hand.
Okay, so we've looked at water, education, waste management. stepping back, what are the common threads here? What makes these diverse initiatives successful?
Well, if we connect this back to the source material, the core innovation, again and again, it isn't really about flashy, cutting-edge technology. It's more subtle. It's about innovations in business models and in social relations.
Can you give examples?
Sure. Think about Khaleesi. The app is a tool, but its real power isn't the code. It's how it empowers that network of collectors and helps restore their dignity.
Right.
Or Teach for Nepal. Their strength isn't necessarily having the latest smart boards in classrooms. It's the strategic creation of this pipeline of future leaders who truly understand the country's grassroots problems. And Smart Pani or Best Pinani. Their filters are effective, yes, but their success hinges on that sustainable service model, building long-term trust and reliability, not just dropping off equipment.
So it's about the how as much as, or maybe even more than, the what.
Precisely. Deep local understanding combined with sustainable, often service-oriented business thinking.
But even with these successes, it can't be easy. What are the main hurdles? What stops these brilliant ideas from scaling up even faster or wider?
Yeah, they definitely face significant barriers. First off, there's often a lack of a clear legal framework. Nepalese law, for instance, doesn't really have a specific category for social enterprise.
So they fall between the cracks.
Exactly. They get stuck in this kind of gray zone between being a nonprofit NGO and a standard for-profit business. This creates confusion around things like taxation, regulation, reporting. It just makes operations more complicated than they need to be.
Okay, legal ambiguity. What else?
Access to funding is a big one. This hybrid nature puts them in what's often called the valley of death for funding.
Why is that?
Well, traditional investors. They usually want maximum financial return and might be wary of the social mission diluting profits.
In charities.
Charities and donors, they tend to prefer funding pure nonprofits. Social enterprises, trying to be financially self-sufficient while doing social good, often don't fit neatly into either box.
So they struggle to find the right kind of investment.
They do. International grants are an option, but accessing them can be tough for Nepali startups. Lots of competition, complex application processes.
Makes sense. Any other major barriers?
Yes, a third big one is simply changing mindsets. Public consciousness. Social entrepreneurs aren't just battling technical or financial issues. They're often fighting against ingrained stereotypes or disbelief.
Like convincing people to pay for something.
Exactly. Convincing people to pay for a service like waste collection, which they might feel should be free or the government's job, takes a lot of effort. It requires education, patience, shifting behaviors and expectations. It's a significant hurdle.
So wrapping this up, what Nepal shows us is pretty remarkable. It feels like a living laboratory, demonstrating how grassroots initiative, born right out of society's needs, can actually drive development when maybe the traditional systems falter.
It really does. And if we connect it back to the bigger picture, the core lesson from these Nepali social startups isn't just for developing countries. It's this idea that true, disruptive innovation often comes from rethinking business models and social relationships, not just from inventing new gadgets. This quiet revolution in Nepal, it underlines a principle that's universally important, I think. Solving our biggest, most complex challenges often demands that deep, empathetic, local understanding, that entrepreneurial spark, and a fundamental belief in community potential, maybe more than it demands huge budgets.
That's a powerful thought.
And it's a lesson that, frankly, developed countries could learn from too, as we all search for paths towards a more sustainable and equitable future.
So maybe the question for you listening is this. What problem in your own community, or maybe your industry, something you take for granted, could be tackled differently? Not necessarily with more money, but with a smarter, simpler innovation in how we connect people, or how we structure a service, or how we just rethink the model. Where might those quiet revolutions be waiting to happen, closer to home?